All right, welcome back. We got our weekly stock market update, and it was a great week this week for the market. We had 2.5% across the board for the S&P, Nasdaq, and the Dow. So strong performance this week. Oil dropped down to $90 a barrel. 10-year yield staying somewhat elevated. It did pull back a little bit, but we did get CPI numbers this week, and they were a little hotter than expected, or they were just hot. I think we were expecting a high number, and that's exactly what it was. So that's keeping the interest rates elevated because we need to see the CPI and the cost of goods, not just energy, but everything, to start to come down. And we're not seeing that just yet. Probably take a few more months until we see that. Even though we did get a little drop in oil, that happened this week. So that's not reflected in the CPI numbers. So this week we did have a 2-week ceasefire announced on Tuesday, and that dropped oil 16% in one day. And we're hoping that we can get the Strait of Hormuz opened back up, but things are still somewhat fragile. There's no clear path. Every hour, every moment, there's things that are going back and forth. So market liked the news. It is great news. Ceasefire's great, but we still need to have a full resolution, and maybe that comes this weekend. Maybe it comes in 3 weeks. Who knows? But oil is still elevated, $20 above the pre-war levels. So we want to get below $80. That's where we need to see oil to cool off the CPI, and I think that'll get us back into a more normal range, even though we were under 60 at some point this year. We need to just see this keep coming down. CPI across the board up. Everything: energy, gasoline, housing, clothing. I was taking a look at it. Everything going up. Services still sticky. Shelter still elevated. So the Fed not likely to cut rates, at least anytime soon. All right, so we'll look at the heat map in a moment, but really this SaaSpocalypse is among us and continuing. These software names are getting just destroyed, and this was a very rough week for a lot of those names. We'll look at that in just a moment. But as far as this week, no major moves. We do have a 2-week ceasefire. Nothing's permanent, so market's in a holding pattern until we get some real resolution there. Step in the right direction this week for sure, but we're still not out of the woods yet. Hot CPI, elevated rates. I'm not chasing this rally, but this is a very constructive rally. I do have hedges in place. I did have to roll out some covered calls today. I rolled out a bunch of calls on Amazon and Nvidia. And I do have a lot of shares that are just naked. So if we continue to rally, I'll lay out some more covered calls. If we drop, I'll be able to get out of some of those covered calls that I rolled. That's what I'm doing. So what we're watching next week: ceasefire. Does it hold or does it collapse? Yields, CPI, 10-year yield going back towards the 4.5% range. And then we do have earnings beginning to start up these next few weeks. But for the shopping list, it's the same. If we pull back, I'm ready to deploy. I'm not chasing the ceasefire rally. We've bought when there's been opportunities, and I'm still staying patient. All right, the heat map, because this tells the story of the week. You've got a lot of green here in the semiconductor names. Let's read off some of these numbers for the week. Broadcom 22%, AMD 20%, Intel up 35% for the week, Nvidia up 10%. Other names that bounced pretty well this week: Google up 9%, Meta 11%. But look at these software names: Oracle down 3%, Palantir down 10%, Salesforce down 10%. It just goes on and on here. A lot of red, so you can see the money coming out of the software names and into the hardware names. Up here in the corner, the manufacturing, huge week this week. So Caterpillar 10%, Lam Research 26% in the week. So again, we're seeing AI, the headlines around AI. We just need more compute, and we don't have enough, and the demand is going to keep growing at a very high clip. Another big name here this week: Amazon 15%. Not sure on the news here for Amazon, but a great week for Amazon, and the energy sector down, obviously because oil's down. Speaking of oil, looking okay here, but we've had drops like this before where we've had 15+% drops and we've retraced back to the upside. So we need some real follow through next week, which potentially could happen, or we could potentially go back up. That'll depend on the geopolitical news. So we'll have to wait and see there. 10-year yield, as we talked about, came down a little bit, but with the stubborn CPI, this still looks bullish, which is not good. So that's, to me, what's going to be very interesting. Once we get resolution with the war, one way or another, either things continue or things resolve themselves, we still have to deal with the economy. So we're going to get out of the geopolitical headlines, and then we're going to get into the macroeconomic headlines, which is going to be sticky inflation, high rates, things like that. So we'll have to wait and see how all that shakes out. Let's take a look at some of these bounces and some of these drops. So Nvidia, great bounce from 168, but we're still just chopping sideways where we've been for almost a year now. But this is a great V-shaped rally, but we've seen many of these before. And until we can get above the 205 and stay there for a couple of weeks, we're still just range bound for a name like Nvidia. Amazon, great bounce this week, from 200 to 240 in a heartbeat. That's a great bounce this week for Amazon. We're back to where we were pre-earnings in January. So good to see there. Google up to 315, another just perfect bounce. We bounced off this level in November from 270 up to 315 this week. Great move there. And let's take a look at some of the drops. So a name like Palantir, down about 17% in 3 days. So again, software names not the market's favorite right now. And you can see that in a name like CrowdStrike, and we can go down through the list here. A lot of names look like this. I still don't quite understand why AI is going to disrupt cybersecurity. I think AI is going to cause a larger demand for cybersecurity. Okay, any other names to look at? Microsoft, I did pick up some shares this week, finally pulled the trigger, starter position on Microsoft. Again, with the increased demand for chips and compute, Microsoft has the second largest cloud business out there with Microsoft Azure. So I think this company will be just fine. I may not be scraping the perfect bottom, and my next buy target for Microsoft is going to be in the 330s. But I think that's going to be about it for this week. We will have a whole nother market update for you next week, and this weekend I will be doing a video on CrowdStrike. So stay tuned for that. And we will see you guys next week. Have a great weekend, and peace out.